Numbers don't lie, but the people who write them sometimes do. And in Germany, one company turned fake numbers into a €24 billion illusion. The company was called Wirecard. Investors called it the future of European finance. Analysts called it Germany's answer to PayPal. Politicians called it national pride. In 2018, Wirecard became so respected that it joined Germany's DAX index, replacing Commerzbank, a historic German bank. That was the symbolic moment. The new tech hero had defeated old finance. But behind the glowing charts, there was a problem. A huge problem. €1.9 billion of supposed cash was sitting on the balance sheet, but nobody could actually prove it existed. And when the auditors finally asked the simplest question in finance, "Show us the money," the miracle collapsed. This is not just a story about a missing pile of cash. It is a story about hype, national pride, weak regulators, aggressive executives, silent auditors, and a fugitive who vanished into the shadows. So how did a company built on payments become one of Europe's biggest financial scandals? And why did so many powerful people ignore the smoke until the entire building was on fire? To understand Wirecard, you have to start where the marketing brochures did not want you to look. Not with artificial intelligence, not with innovation, with the messy early internet. Wirecard was founded in 1999, during the wild years of the dot-com boom. Back then, the internet looked like the future, but nobody was completely sure which parts of that future were legal, profitable, or even real. Wirecard found its first opportunity in businesses traditional banks did not want to touch: online gambling, adult entertainment, and other high-risk corners of the internet. That was the gap. Merchants needed payment processing. Banks hated the reputational risk. Wirecard stepped in and said, "We will process the money nobody else wants." This is important because every financial scandal has a personality from birth. Wirecard was born comfortable with grey zones, and once a company learns that grey zones pay, it rarely becomes more innocent with scale. Then came Markus Braun, a former consultant from Austria, calm, controlled, and always dressed like a man auditioning to be the Steve Jobs of payments. Braun did not sell Wirecard as a payment processor. That sounded boring. He sold it as an ecosystem, a platform, a data company, an artificial intelligence machine, and whatever phrase made analysts lean forward. But the first shortcut came early. Instead of going through a heavily scrutinized traditional IPO, Wirecard used a reverse listing. In simple English, it found a backdoor into the public market. Then Wirecard bought a small bank. That gave it a banking license, access, credibility, and a much more serious costume. Now the payment processor could dress itself like a financial institution. From the outside, the machine looked brilliant. Digital payments were growing, e-commerce was expanding, smartphones were spreading. Wirecard stood in the middle of every trend investors loved, and that is where the trap begins. A good story makes investors curious, a great story makes them excited, but a perfect story makes them stop checking. Wirecard's perfect story needed perfect profits. And the man responsible for building that story internationally was Jan Marsalek. Marsalek was not a normal corporate executive. He had the aura of a spy novel character who accidentally wandered into an accounting department. He helped push Wirecard into Asia and the Middle East, where the company claimed some of its fastest growth was happening. Germany, Dubai, Singapore, the Philippines, money seemed to be bouncing everywhere. The explanation sounded technical but simple. Wirecard said it used third-party partners in countries where it did not directly process payments. These partners supposedly handled transactions and sent Wirecard commissions. On paper, that looked normal. In reality, it created the perfect hiding place. Because when profits come from distant partners in opaque markets, verifying the money becomes much harder. And this is where Wirecard's miracle starts to smell strange. Huge profits were supposedly coming from a few overseas partners nobody could properly see. One alleged partner in the Philippines was so underwhelming that it reportedly shared space with a local bus company. That is not exactly what you expect from the engine room of a global fintech empire. But Wirecard's reported numbers kept rising. Revenue up, profits up, market value up, doubt down. That is how bubbles seduce smart people. The company was now telling the market exactly what it wanted to hear. Germany had finally produced a global tech champion. That national pride mattered, because once a company becomes a symbol, Criticism stopped sounding like analysis. It starts sounding like an attack. And then came the journalists. At the Financial Times, Dan McCrum and his team looked at Wirecard's numbers and saw something the market did not want to see. The numbers were too smooth, too perfect, too magical. In finance, perfection is not always a sign of excellence. Sometimes it is a sign that someone is sanding off reality. But Wirecard did not respond like a transparent company. It responded like a cornered animal with a legal budget. Instead of opening the books and saying, "Here, check everything," Wirecard attacked the critics. Journalists, short sellers, skeptics. Anyone asking questions became the enemy. Private investigators reportedly followed critics. Hackers targeted skeptics. The message was clear: stop looking under the hood. That is a major warning sign. Real businesses usually want to prove the critics wrong with evidence. Fake stories try to scare the critics into silence. Then the scandal became even stranger. Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, did not first crush Wirecard with an investigation. It banned short selling of Wirecard stock. Think about that. Critics were saying, this company might be hiding fraud. And the watchdog basically put a leash on the critics instead of opening the vault. Wirecard had become too important to doubt, too German to embarrass, too successful to question, and that is exactly when questions become most important. The market was now split in two. Believers saw a misunderstood fintech champion. Skeptics saw a balance sheet with holes big enough to drive a truck through. For years, the believers won. Wirecard's stock survived the allegations, executives dismissed the critics, and every delay made the illusion look stronger. But fraud has one weakness. It can fight opinions. It can fight journalists. It can fight short sellers. But eventually, it has to fight documents. Inside Wirecard's Singapore office, a lawyer named Pav Gill started seeing things that did not make sense. Contracts, spreadsheets, transactions. The paper trail was beginning to scream. This is how many scandals break. Not from the outside first, from someone inside the machine who finally realizes the machine is lying. Gill became a whistleblower. Internal documents began moving out. The beautiful Wirecard story now had an enemy it could not intimidate: its own files. The leak was massive. Around 70 gigabytes of internal material, enough contracts, emails, and records to turn suspicion into a map. The Financial Times now had more than questions. It had documents. And documents are dangerous because they do not care about reputation. Under pressure, Wirecard hired KPMG for a special audit. This was supposed to calm the market. Instead, it poured gasoline on the doubts. In April 2020, KPMG could not verify major parts of Wirecard's third-party business. The machine that supposedly produced the profits was suddenly covered in question marks. For any serious investor, that should have been deafening. If a company's profits cannot be verified, the profits are no longer profits. They are claims. Still, some believers held on. They told themselves the critics were biased, the auditors were confused, the company was misunderstood. This is what denial sounds like when it has a brokerage account. Then came June 18th, 2020, the day the illusion ran out of oxygen. EY, Wirecard's longtime auditor, refused to sign the 2019 accounts. The reason was devastating. EY could not obtain enough evidence that 1.9 billion euros in trust account cash actually existed. This was not a tiny accounting issue. That missing cash represented roughly a quarter of Wirecard's balance sheet. Imagine opening your wallet and discovering 25% of your entire financial life was imaginary. Wirecard said the money was held in trust accounts at banks in the Philippines, so everyone looked there. And that is when the story became almost absurd. The Philippine banks denied it. The documents were fake. The money had not entered their system. The 1.9 billion euros did not just go missing. It had likely never been there. That sentence is the heart of Wirecard. The money was not stolen from a vault. The vault was part of the story. The cash was a character in a fiction. On June 22nd, Wirecard admitted the missing money probably did not exist. 3 days later, the company filed for insolvency. The collapse was brutal. A company once treated like the pride of German technology became the first DAX member to fall into insolvency. The stock did not decline politely. It fell off a cliff. Billions in market value evaporated, while retail investors watched their accounts bleed red. Markus Braun resigned. Then he was arrested. The man who sold Wirecard as a futuristic payments empire was now at the center of a fraud case that stunned Europe. Braun has denied wrongdoing, Prosecutors say the business was built on fake revenue, fake profits, and fake cash. The courtroom became the final battlefield over what Wirecard really was. But Jan Marsalek did something different. He did not stay to explain the missing billions. He disappeared. He reportedly told colleagues he was going to the Philippines to find the missing money. But the trail moved toward Belarus, then Russia. The man at the center of the phantom profits had become a ghost. Marsalek became one of Europe's most wanted fugitives, and later investigations linked his fugitive life to an even darker world of espionage allegations and Russian intelligence networks. That is what makes Wirecard feel unreal. It starts with online payments and ends with missing billions. Forged bank documents, regulators humiliated, investors wiped out, and a fugitive in a spy thriller. But beneath the drama, the lesson is simple. Wirecard was not impossible to question. People questioned it for years. The problem was that too many powerful people did not like the answers. Lesson 1. Growth is not proof. A rising stock price does not mean a company is healthy. Sometimes it only means the story is still working. Lesson 2. Cash matters. Revenue can be massaged, profits can be adjusted. But if a company says it has cash, someone must be able to verify where that cash is. Lesson 3. When a company attacks critics harder than it answers questions, pay attention. The reaction often tells you more than the press release. Lesson 4. Regulators can fail. Auditors can fail. Analysts can fail. Index committees can fail. No badge, logo, or institution is a substitute for verification. Lesson 5. National pride is dangerous in investing. The market does not care if a company makes a country feel modern. Bad numbers are still bad numbers. Wirecard fooled people because it gave them a story they wanted to believe. A European tech champion, a digital payments giant, a company that made Germany look like Silicon Valley. And once people believe a story deeply enough, evidence stops feeling like information. It starts feeling like betrayal. That is why fraud is not just an accounting problem. It is a psychology problem. It feeds on greed, trust, identity, fear of missing out, and the desire to be early. Wirecard did not collapse because one journalist got lucky. It collapsed because the documents, the auditors, the banks, and the missing cash finally lined up in the same direction. And once the cash disappeared, the whole empire disappeared with it. Because without verified cash, the 24 billion euro valuation was not an empire. It was a mirage. The tragedy is that ordinary investors paid the price. Many were not insiders. They were regular people who believed the brand, trusted the market, and watched their savings vanish. The regulators were embarrassed. The auditors were questioned. German finance was humiliated. And the world learned that even a blue-chip company can be built on fog. Wirecard spent years selling certainty, but the ending revealed the opposite. The partners were questionable, the profits were questionable, the cash was imaginary, and the fugitive was real. So the next time a company says, "Trust us, the growth is real," ask the boring question. Where is the cash? And if the answer comes wrapped in buzzwords, foreign partners, legal threats, and attacks on journalists, you may not be looking at innovation. You may be looking at a cover story. That is the missing billions of Wirecard. A fintech miracle that became a financial crime scene. A national champion that became a national embarrassment. And one of the clearest reminders that in finance, belief is never a substitute for proof. What do you think? Was Wirecard a failure of auditors, regulators, investors, or all of them at once? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. If you enjoyed the story of the missing billions of Wirecard, then you'll love the story of one man destroyed a 233-year-old bank. Click the video on your screen now. I'll see you there.